Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. On behalf of ADB, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to today's deep dive workshop, Powering the Future Women, Innovation and Future Jobs. And I have to say, it's especially great to see so many of you here at this point in the day, so congratulations to making it almost to the finish line of another long ASEF day. My name is Jessica Henn. I'm a gender specialist at the Asian Development Bank. I'll be your MC for today's session. We have a great program ahead of us. We'll begin with some scene-setting reflections and research insights before moving to a panel discussion and Q&A. We hope you'll leave with not only a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead, but also some practical ideas you can take back into your own work. To get us started, it's my pleasure to invite Keiko Novetska, Director of the Gender Equality Division in ADB's Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, where she leads ADB's work on gender equality and women's empowerment. Keiko, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's really nice to see a full room at this time of the day. So welcome to this session, Powering the Future, Women, Innovation and Future Jobs at ASEF. And it's particularly nice to see a full room during ASEF, where in the past, gender equality, gender mainstreaming wasn't always part of the energy kind of discussions. Success was measured in megawatts, transmission lines, connection points, and now, as everybody in this room knows, that is really changing, and the perception of where gender and energy intersect is better appreciated. So with a kind of view on the future jobs also, what are the jobs of the future look like for women in the energy sector? So that's what this session is going to be also exploring. So across Asia and the Pacific, the energy sector is undergoing a profound transformation. Countries are investing in clean and renewable energy and more resilient energy systems. These shifts are not only changing how energy is produced and consumed, they are also reshaping labor markets, skills demand, business models, and the jobs of the future. Their transition represents one of the greatest economic and workforce opportunities of our generation. There is also growing recognition that the energy transition is not only about infrastructure and technology, but also about people. Who benefits, who participates, and who shapes the future. That progress matters, but it is not enough. As the energy transition creates new industries, markets, and jobs, women remain significantly underrepresented across the energy sector. In Asia and the Pacific, women account for only about 1/3 of the region's green talent pool. Globally, although women make up nearly 40% of the overall workforce, they hold only 16% of jobs in the energy sector. In South Asia, women's participation is even lower, ranging from just 3% to 15%. These gaps are even more pronounced in leadership and entrepreneurship, limiting women's ability to shape and benefit from the clean energy transition. These are not simply statistics, they are a warning sign. If women are left behind, we do not only fall short on gender equality, we also constrain the talent, productivity, innovation, and workforce needed for an inclusive, resilient, and prosperous energy future. At ADB, gender mainstreaming is central to our operations, including in the energy sector. We work with governments, the private sector, and project teams to ensure that projects reflect different needs and opportunities, and identify entry points to expand women's participation and leadership. We recognize that access to skills, training, and career pathways is essential for women to participate in emerging energy sectors. STEM education and technical training are especially important entry points, opening pathways for women and girls to pursue higher value roles in renewable energy, digital energy systems, smart infrastructure, energy storage, and other future-oriented fields. But skills alone are not sufficient. Women also need inclusive workplaces, professional networks, access to finance, and opportunities to move into leadership and decision-making roles. The opportunity is also not limited to formal employment. The energy transition is creating new space for innovators and entrepreneurs. Women-led clean energy innovators can bring practical solutions to communities, households, and markets, but they need access to finance, networks, and business support to launch and scale their ideas. These efforts matter, but no single institution can solve this challenge alone. Today's discussion is an opportunity to hear directly from leaders and practitioners working on these issues. Together, we will explore how governments, industry, education systems, and partners can ensure women are not only part of the energy transition, but leaders within it. The question is no longer whether women belong in the future of the energy workforce. It is how quickly we remove the barriers that still stand in their way, and how effectively we create the pathways for them to lead. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Keiko. As Keiko highlighted, the energy transition presents enormous opportunities, but unless we act intentionally, many women risk being left out of those opportunities. To help us unpack some of these trends, challenges, and opportunities, I'm very pleased to invite Emily So, energy specialist at ADB. Please welcome her to the stage. Thank you.
My name is Emily So, and I'm very happy to be invited here. And I will confidently would like to say I am maybe a living example of how gender role evolved, because my first job after university was a flight attendant. I might be the only ex-flight attendant banker in ADB. And now I am working as I call it pretend-engineer, because I pretend to be an engineer and I'm not exactly an engineer. Most of times the people that I work with, they are all engineers and I'm the only woman in the discussion. So after being an energy specialist, I deal with a lot of dry topics that you might think of: transmission lines, battery storage, or substations, right? Those topics with the government, with other technicians. But increasingly, I see different topics discussed now. It's about people, how we work with the people, and who works on what. So the energy transition is not only about how we produce and consume the energy. It's more about how we transform economies, how we transform the industries, how we transform also the jobs. So today, I would like to set the scene by exploring 3 questions. First, how we change the future of work through energy transition, and what opportunities does this create for women, and what must be ensured that women can fully benefit from this transition and they can fully participate. So there are some figures how energy transition is changing economies and jobs. We see clean energy employs 35 million people, and renewable energy alone employs 16 million people. Also, more than 30 million jobs going to be created by 2030 through clean energy and also energy efficiency and low emission technologies. And what's interesting is that we do not resemble traditional energy jobs. We see energy career that people think is usually power plants or transmissions, but actually many new jobs that sits between, that sits at the intersection. So for example, finance, like where we work, and the innovation and other tech jobs. So what might the future energy workforce look like? Those things that I mentioned, like batteries, storage related jobs, or artificial intelligence, the AI jobs, and also smart grid jobs and climate finance jobs. and some other leadership jobs. Those are basically the new jobs. It's hard to imagine and picture what are the gender roles that we can include in energy transition jobs. So I pulled out some examples. So renewable energy, we can see solar engineers, wind technicians, and a project developer, and digital energy data analysis, AI specialists, smart grid operators, and many more in climate change and critical mineral. Those jobs are the new high quality jobs. Despite these opportunities, still gap exists and the women remain underrepresented in many sectors. Women in renewable energy is taking only 1/3 of the workforce. And the women in technical roles, they are also underrepresented because of the women who participate STEM education is very few. I remember my master course in Germany, it was renewable energy. There were less than 10 girls out of around 40 people. Maybe it's quite high number, or I don't know if they've selected intentionally, but this is how STEM education is promoted right now for females. I think this is not only gender issue, this is also economic issue, as I emphasized. It's also workforce issue and the energy transition issue. So why do these gaps exist? The answer is probably structural barriers. We do have a few layers of barriers, which is a lot of women work in unpaid care responsibilities, and also gender stereotypes that women cannot work in tech field, limited access to skills development. Also, women have less access to the financing, and they influence who enters the workforce eventually, and who stays and who advances. That means eventually the leadership role, there are less women. This is, I think, where institutions like ADB can play a very important role. So ADB's approach focuses on expanding opportunities for women in technical and also leadership role. We are moving beyond the energy access. You probably heard open to energy access for women several years ago. Our focus now is moved to employment and leadership and more influential role for women. The objective is to ensure women are helping shape the future of the energy sector. That is the importance. I think with this slide, I would like to, I want to look forward hearing other presenters and also panelists to discuss how we can collectively make the vision to a reality in our energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily, for providing an overview and highlighting some of the opportunities that are there for women in the energy sector, going beyond what we may typically expect. So to build on that discussion, we're pleased to have Dr. Elizabeth Kirkwood joining us via a pre-recorded video. Elizabeth is a research fellow and lecturer at the University of Sydney, whose work sits at the intersection of gender, energy, and development. Her research examines how gender shapes energy policy and decision-making, and what that means for achieving more equitable outcomes. Let's hear now from Elizabeth.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kirkwood, and I'm a research fellow and lecturer at the Sydney School of Public Health at the University of Sydney. And the focus of my work is really exploring how gender shapes the design, delivery, and impact of interventions the health of women and children in low resource settings. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today and share my new research on gender gaps in energy policies across the Asia Pacific region. And I would just like to acknowledge, recognise and pay respect to the elders and communities, past, present and emerging, of the lands that the University of Sydney's campuses stand on. And for thousands of years, they've shared and exchanged knowledges across innumerable generations for the benefit of all. And today I'm recording this session on Darug and Gundandara land in the Blue Mountains. So as we move forward in the clean energy transition, there is a tendency to focus primarily on technologies, infrastructure and investment. But the energy transition is not just a technical issue. It is fundamentally a social justice issue as well. So as we move beyond the transition, the critical question is not just what energy systems we build, but who benefits, who participates and who is left behind. And the clean energy transition will reshape who participates in energy systems, who benefits, and whose needs are prioritised. So I think today I'd like to focus on one critical question. How do we ensure that the energy transition is genuinely inclusive and that it actively advances gender equality rather than reproducing existing inequalities? So let's start by thinking about the problem at hand, and that is persistent gender gaps in energy systems, and really start to think about why does gender matter? Well, women play central roles in energy systems, both as consumers and producers of energy, yet across many contexts, women face persistent barriers. Women are key energy users and managers. However, they often have limited access to clean and affordable energy. There's unequal agency and participation in decision-making in the energy sector. And there's also an underrepresentation of women across technical and leadership roles in the energy sector. I think at the same time, we can also acknowledge that energy poverty is deeply gendered, and women often carry the burden of unpaid labour, such as fuel collection and cooking, which limits opportunities for education, employment and economic participation. If we think about the workforce dimension, the energy sector remains male-dominated with many structural barriers to entry. So gender inequality in energy, it's not a niche issue, it's central to health, livelihoods and development outcomes. So the question arises, are our national level energy policies actually responding to these realities? And this led us to our research question. Our research strove to answer in some ways a very simple question, but to what extent are gender considerations actually integrated into national energy policies across the Asia Pacific region? So given that we know the important role that gender plays, we would expect energy policies to reflect these realities and to respond to different energy needs, to the unequal access to resources and to structural barriers to participation. So how do we go about answering this question? Well, what we did was we reviewed the integration of women and more broadly gender issues in national level energy policies from the Asia Pacific Energy Portal. 43 countries were included from the Asia Pacific geographical region, and we searched the Asia Pacific Energy Portal for energy policies between 2015 and 2022. We analysed these policies using the analytical framework for gender responsive energy policies to really identify the level of gender integration in these policies. So this framework was used to assess the level of integration of gender in areas such as access to energy, participation in decision making, employment and economic empowerment, gender mainstreaming, and data and accountability mechanisms. And this really allowed us to move beyond whether gender was mentioned, but to actually explore whether it was meaningfully integrated into policies. And I think what this next slide demonstrates in terms of our key findings, that the key findings are quite stark. Of the 385 energy policies that we reviewed, only 16 policies from 10 countries included gender. And whilst we can see that gender was sometimes acknowledged, it was rarely embedded in policy design. So gender was present in 4% of the policies, but often it was not well integrated. Gender inclusion was often superficial or symbolic and limited to brief mentions rather than actionable commitments. So how was gender framed in these energy policies? Well, as I've mentioned, when it was included, it was often framed in quite a narrow way. So most commonly, women were positioned as vulnerable groups, particularly in relation to energy poverty and household energy use. Somewhat less frequently, they were recognised as decision makers, leaders, or innovatives in the energy sector. And most policies did not include concrete actions, they did not include implementation strategies, and critically, they did not include monitoring and evaluation or accountability mechanisms. So across the policies, several key gaps emerge: that there's really limited recognition of women's participation in energy decision making. There was minimal attention to women's roles across the full energy value chain. And there was very little integration of gender into workforce development. This is combined with a significant lack of sex and gender disaggregated data to guide policy and track progress. So without these elements, it's very difficult to design or evaluate inclusive energy systems. And I guess another key question to consider is, why does this matter and why does this matter now? Well, I think addressing and including gender in national level energy policy matters because it's in the context of the current clean energy transition, and it matters more now because we're not just transforming energy systems, we're also transforming labour markets and future jobs. So there's a real risk that these existing inequalities are carried forward or even deepened as new industries and opportunities emerge. And at the same time, we must recognise that this is a major opportunity because by closing gender gaps, we can expand the workforce, we can increase innovation, we can improve policy effectiveness, and we can deliver more equitable and sustainable outcomes. So if we don't design gender responsive energy systems now, we really risk locking inequality into the next generation of energy systems. So how do we go about this? How do we reframe our approaches? So what's needed is a shift in how we think about gender in energy policies. We need to change the narrative, and we really need to move beyond women as seen as a vulnerable group to really, exploring and expanding women as active agents of change. So this means shifting that narrative and recognizing women as consumers of energy, as producers of energy, as entrepreneurs in the energy sector with agency and leadership across the energy systems. So why is closing gender gaps critical for future energy systems? Well, if we don't do this, there will be missed economic opportunities. Excluding women limits productivity, innovation, and workforce expansion. If there are ineffective policies and investments, these policies will ignore gender and fail to reflect real energy use and needs. We risk not transforming the workforce. New green jobs could actually replicate existing inequalities unless we start to address gender from the outset. And I think in terms of energy justice, we know that equitable transitions require recognition, representation, and redistribution across the sector. So based on our findings, I'd really like to highlight 4 practical entry points for the pathway forward. Firstly, we need to embed gender in policy design. Gender should not be an add-on. It really needs to be built into policy goals, into implementation frameworks, and we need gender responsive frameworks that champion women's participation, their access, employment, and leadership in the energy sector. And all of these need to have clear links to targets and budgets. So they need to be supported by financing mechanisms in these budgets. I think secondly, we need to invest in women in the energy workforce. And this includes skills development, technical training, and addressing structural barriers to entry and advancement in the sector. A third key pathway for moving forward is to strengthen participation and leadership for women, to ensure that they are actively involved in decision-making processes, policy design, and sector governance. And fourthly, to improve data and accountability. This is critical. We need to collect sex disaggregated and gender data. We need to set targets and we need to monitor progress, because what gets measured often gets prioritised. And so to conclude this presentation, I'd just like to put the QR code up there for the paper, which has all the details, and a QR code if you'd like to reach out and contact me. But I think the transition to clean energy presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity, but these inclusive outcomes are not automatic. They depend on deliberate, intentional policy design. So gender equality, it's not an add-on to the energy transition, it's a prerequisite for building systems that are inclusive, resilient, and effective. So closing gender gaps is not just about equity, it's about building better energy systems for everyone. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I think we all learned a lot from those rich insights. So we will now continue the discussion by moving to our panel, where we'll explore how many of these issues are playing out in practice. We're fortunate to be joined by an excellent group of speakers bringing perspectives from government, the private sector, and development practice. Moderating today's discussion is my colleague Jinha Kim, gender specialist at ADB, whose work focuses on the intersections between gender equality, climate action, and digital transformation. Please welcome our speakers to the stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jess, and good afternoon. Thank you. So good afternoon, colleagues and distinguished guests. And I'm very happy to see the full room too. And welcome to our panel discussion on the next energy workforce, women, innovation, and future jobs. So first of all, I'd like to thank you everybody for joining us today. Given the impressive lineup of the sessions this afternoon, I appreciate your presence here and your interest in conversation that focuses on women and girls who will help shape the future of the energy sector. So you joined the right session today. Before we begin, let me briefly reflect on some of the important messages we have heard just before from the speakers. Our speakers have highlighted both the promise and also the challenges of the energy transition. While new technologies and industries are creating opportunities for future jobs, women remain underrepresented across the energy sector, and gender considerations are still often overlooked in policy and decision making. So the question before us now is how we translate these insights into the practical actions. And this is precisely the purpose of today's panel discussion. We will move from the understanding the challenges to exploring the solutions. So we will hear practical experiences and lessons from the government, private sector, and our own colleagues. Now, without further ado, I'm delighted to be joined by three distinguished panelists. Let me invite my panelists when I introduce them. So first, we have Ms. Hirsch de la Cruz. Please come join me on the floor. Division Chief and Chief Science Research Specialist at the Department of Energy of the Philippines. Ms. Hirsch works at the forefront of energy policy, climate action, and environmental management and resilience planning, helping to advance the Philippines' energy transition while promoting a just and inclusive energy future. Next, we are joined by Dr. Diksha Thapa. Please welcome. She's a Senior Manager for ESG and Social Inclusion and Gender at Tetra Tech. With more than 15 years of experience across Asia and the Pacific, Dr. Diksha has worked with government, development partners, utilities, and private sector organizations to integrate gender equality and social inclusion into energy and infrastructure investments. Last but not least, please welcome Ms. Navina Ibrahim, Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Asian Development Bank, bringing over 15 years of experience in international climate policy and finance. She leads ADB's Just Transition Support Platform. Prior to joining ADB, Navina served as a German member of UNFCCC Adaptation Committee and as a climate negotiator on the Paris Agreement and the Katowice Rulebook, and led GIZ's Just Energy Transition Program in South Africa. So please join me once more in welcoming our panelists. So let's start our discussion. We have great three leaders in the sector, like female leaders. So let's start with Ms. Hershey. Ms. Hershey, as the Philippines advances its energy transition, what is the current status of women's participation and leadership in the energy sector, particularly in terms of the technical and leadership roles? And I would also like to hear from you the remaining barriers and approaches to help further integrate women workforce into the sector.
Can I have no? Can I have my slide, please? It's just one slide to showcase where the leadership is in the Department of Energy, in the energy sector. So this slide actually shows the past and present leadership of the Department of Energy. So women is not new in terms of leadership and policy setting at the Department of Energy. In fact, when I first came to the department, my immediate division chief and my two directors were actually women. So they were leading, the whole planning bureau at that time was led by women. And we were at that time shaping what was the energy plan and what are the policies that was needed, and among those are the natural gas development of the country. It shaped the current natural gas system, and of course my boss at that time also encouraged me to be in the energy and climate change nexus, which until now I am currently practicing at the department. So shown on the slide is that at least at the Department of Energy, where policy is being done for the Philippine energy sector, half of us are women who are not only at the technical level, but also at the leadership and even mid-managerial. This shows the past, the present, and hopefully the future energy leaders of the country. So shown here is the former Secretary Zenaida Monsada, and the first female geologist in the Philippines, Mrs. Bausa. So these are the rule breakers in terms of technical leadership and policy directions. And of course, now currently we're being led again by another female. And in our leadership, Undersecretary Guevara is on the other room presenting nuclear power. So, and of course, yesterday, Undersecretary Mylene Kapongkol was also here presenting about the energy sector. So it's not new in our leadership. So we have engineers, geologists, chemists, planners, and economists at the department. So, however, this does not translate to the private sector. At the private sector, it's only around 15 to 20% energy at that technical and the leadership levels. So this is the area where I think intervention has to be done. When they recruit new employees, they say that women are encouraged to apply, but when final selection happens, I guess this is where the limitations, as they say, becomes a barrier for women to be in the field. I think this is also one of the reasons why the technical persons are in the Department of Energy and not at the power plants or the sites. So at least we're leading them, but yeah, there's unequal access also to technology and education, particularly for the rural areas. So we have opportunities here, but in the rural areas, that's also where, and that's where the power plants are, especially the renewable energy power projects. So we also have, as part of our activities, there's a GAD toolkit that we have developed, and it's being upgraded now through a project. And I guess one of the reasons is also this toolkit should not only be a toolkit, but it should be used and implemented. It should not sit at the back or at the bookcase where it's a reference, but it should be implemented, and actual activities on enhancing and implementing and engaging women in all of aspects of the energy sector should be done. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. You just highlighted that at the Department of Energy level, while you have good women champions and leadership, and you're now, it seems like you're achieving great gender balance almost. So you see a lot of women in technical or leadership roles. However, in Philippines, still it is a challenge that in private sectors, for example, or in rural areas, it is more challenging to attract the women workforce and get them actually into the sector and get the quality jobs. And I believe one of the challenges is that although you have great knowledge products and the policy in place, the actual implementation is challenging for various reasons. And actually that is very good topic, as I'm going to ask our next panelist, Dr. Diksha, to explain a little bit more about the private sector's perspective. So we just heard from Ms. Hershey about the public sector view, and I'd like to now invite you to share a little bit about where you work and what your work is about, and from a private sector perspective, what is the current things being done to advance women's participation and leadership in the sector? And if you have any good examples, I'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inha. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here. My name is Diksha Thapa. I lead the ESG and social inclusion team at Tetra Tech. Our company is a management consultancy firm. It's headquartered in California, but we have offices globally around the world, and we work on engineering and climate change solutions. And I'm joined here by my colleague Nilesh and Rafa as well. So in terms of women's sort of participation in the private sector, so we all need a framework to begin with. And in my head, there's always a three-pronged framework. There is the policies, there's the macro level, there's the institutional level, and then there's the community and beneficiary level. So we need interventions, obviously, at the policy level, where the state is responsible, or you have regulations that enable women's participation. Now, the private sector is more relevant when we're talking about the institutional level, right? So we're talking about private companies and how do you improve women's access. And then the third, equally important, is, of course, at the community level, where we're talking more about women as entrepreneurs and beneficiaries of energy, and their sort of behavior change interventions and norms are probably more important. So let me talk a little bit more about the private sector and the institutional level. So I think the work to improve women's entry and employment and experience, I think that's been going on now for several years. It's been over a decade. But I still haven't seen any systematic, large-scale impact. Interventions seem more maybe targeted and less, I wouldn't say replicable, but maybe the impact isn't as large. And so there are a few programs that I know of personally. And of course, let me talk about one of them. And using the sort of lessons of existing and also previous programs, we have a program to improve women's entry and workplace experience, retention, and promotion as well. It's called Engendering Industries. Now it is under different names, but we still use the same technique. And it's implemented in over 40 countries with 41 utilities. This is old data, so it's more than 41 partners now, and actually not 27, but 40 countries. So what we do, and what we found is that it's not just enough to do trainings to improve women's workplace experience. We want to look at the situation more systematically. And so what we end up doing is, we start with the situation of the utility, and we do an audit of what is the current situation. Let me move to the next slide. So after our audit, you see something like this, where we look at what are the existing policies, right? So is there a gender equality policy? Is there a social inclusion policy? Do you have family leave? Do you have parental leave? Do you have menstrual health management? Do you have workplace policies to prevent and respond to domestic violence, not workplace violence? Do you have sexual harassment? And so on and so forth. And as a result of this audit, we come up with interventions across these different areas. And so just to give you an example, right? So we have interventions to improve attraction and talent outreach. So as my colleague just said here, everybody says women are encouraged to apply, but we know that there are biases that exist in job adverts. There's biases at sourcing, where you get women from the same networks in energy institutions. Women don't have access to information, and so on and so forth. And this is not just in the energy sector, it's across all male-dominated sectors. And in fact, there is a larger discrimination or bias attached to this aspect, which may be unconscious as well. For example, there was a very interesting landmark paper written in 2004 by Sendil Mullainathan and Marion Bertrand, and it was called, "Are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal?" And that showed, very clearly that there was I think they deployed about 5,000 CVs to organizations, and they didn't change anything, just the names. And the result was that, Emily and Greg got more callbacks and less out. They had to do less reaching out. So attraction and talent outreach is an area that needs intervention. We follow very closely, what is the recruitment and hiring process? What is the company's onboarding and training, performance management, talent and leadership development, employment, engagement, and retention. So in retention, you have, for example, the motherhood penalty, the care work penalty that women have to pay. So we intervene along those lines as well. We have succession planning and promotion interventions. And all of these they involve not just training, but also day-to-day advising and coaching and working with the utility. And we work at the correct level, which is, with the decision makers. There's no point only training the women themselves, which ends up happening quite a lot. So you want to involve the men. You want to do male allyship training as well, and intervene at the right level within the company. So with this work, we have been able to improve the business of the utility as well. And so we do make a case moving, from the get-go, that this is not just about improving women's jobs. This is also about profit for the business. And there's clear mechanisms through which women's entry and having more women along the energy value chain, whether it's in the power plants or whether it's in the technical positions. That leads to higher company ROI, leads to increased profits, increased or better problem solving. And these have been documented well by research and literature. So this program has been able to, do quite a lot. As I mentioned before, we have been able to, for just some numbers, we've been able to engage 2,000 female job seekers that have been reached through outreach programs to schools. We have been 955 women have been promoted as a result of the intervention. 6,000 women have been trained on technical and soft skills. 57 policies have been created that didn't exist before in all of these utilities that we worked with. So I think, and the reason why we've been able to do all this is because we looked at the supply side as well as the demand side. So it's not just about looking at the utility and the workplace policies, but also how do you improve the female talent pipeline? How can you do better school to work programs? How can you engage women's interest and raise awareness? Maybe you want to do job talks or better internships or mentorships, just sort of a day in the life of an engineer, and just increase that awareness for female, for young women wanting to enter. And as I said, I can't stress enough the importance of involving men. And let me just conclude by saying I don't think the women's participation in energy, it has to be pitched not just as a women's issue, but a gender equality issue. And it's also as much a male problem. And this issue of toxic masculinity, which is that it doesn't mean that masculinity is toxic. It means that there are norms that are harmful for boys and men as much as for women. And I think this has to be also very much part of the rhetoric and the discourse when we talk about improving women's participation in the energy sector. And with that, I'll conclude. Thanks.
Thank you, Diksha. I think you addressed a few very important points here, like the life cycle of the employee and how to create the right system and the culture to involve women and more in the sector. So for example, it was very impressive to see that there are some efforts to provide like entry points level. Like I just saw from your screen that there are some school outreach programs to attract more female students into the sector and dedicated training for the staff, as well as I see that there are some efforts happening to create more inclusive working culture, addressing some norms and biases. And I could also see that there are some dedicated funding for a gender initiative by the Tetra Tech, which was also very interesting. I think I will get back to you on that afterwards. But thank you very much for sharing your example. And now let me move on to our next panel. So Navina, we just heard from the Philippines about their case, and also Tetra Tech shared their example in the private sector. And we could see that our partners accelerate the energy transition in their own way, and also there are a lot of efforts in creating more better workforce. So what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities for women in the just transition context in our region? I'd love to hear from you more the regional context. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question, and allow me to start by congratulating the previous two panelists for the work that you have been completed. But also, I would like to highlight a personal story. I've been working on Just Transition for 7 years, and this is the first time that I'm in a female-only panel. So it's quite fascinating. Thank you to the colleagues for doing that. And at the same time, I would like to thank all the participants for joining us, but particularly our male colleagues for joining us, because you are the allies that we really need when we talk about just transition as well as any other gender relevant topic. So, I mean, going back to the main issue, when we think of energy transition, we need to think more holistically, and not only energy transition, but also acknowledge the fact that 1 in 3 people still don't have energy access, and women are more affected by this than men. This translates into the care economy, and we can unpack that later. But looking at it and looking at just transition, so what we understand as just transition is looking at a sector, cross-sector approach, looking at the whole economy, and how does the economy change when we go to low carbon economies? How do we future-proof this economy so that these socioeconomic impacts do not affect people, men and women, but also do not affect the economy itself? So we're not only thinking of energy, but we're thinking of other sectors, transport, inevitably, agriculture, waste management, but also soft sectors such as social protection, employment, and so on. And now, why am I highlighting this? We saw in the presentation from Professor Elizabeth that they did an analysis of how gender is mirrored in energy policies. This is great. It's a very important first step, but it's not enough. Because when we look at gender or we look at climate ambition, it needs to be embedded. It needs to be mainstreamed in policies. It doesn't have beneficial aspect to be a standalone policy. So thinking of just transition, again, you have to look at it as many pieces of a puzzle, and you have energy access, you have energy transition to regenerative energy, you have social protection, insurance schemes, pension schemes, and so on and so forth. And all of these elements need to include gender dimensions. If they don't, that creates a massive problem. So just reflecting a little bit on your presentation, Dr. Tara, one of the things we're observing in our work, especially in our region, is, this was mentioned before, only 16% of women are engaged in the energy sector. And at the same time, we know from ILO and others that there's going to be like 100 million jobs per year globally starting 2030 due to the energy transition. But these jobs are going to be high-skilled jobs. The main issue we have is going back to the girl child. If a girl is not allowed to finish elementary school or finish reading and writing, you're already creating a massive barrier in her to enter this new economy. So that's one element. The other element is mobility, and mobility in terms of access to education, availability of education, but also social dimensions or cultural dimensions that might create a physical access to it. And those need to be taken into account. So when we're discussing just transition approaches at the national level, we're looking with the relevant agencies or sectoral ministries into how to ensure that we can have things such as mobile clinics that provide information and education at the elementary school level, that provide information on STEAM opportunities for 5th, 6th graders, but also that provide technical capacitation for women, especially in rural areas. And of course, when I say for women, of course, men can also attend this, but the physical barrier is more commonly for women. And ensuring that they are trained at night or on the weekend or early in the morning, depending on the cultural context of the society. And taking these barriers into approach, we can still building opportunities that we identify a risk and start figuring out how to solve it. Nothing I'm saying is new. All of this has been part of the whole principle of development cooperation, development, if you look at the SDGs, everything is in it. But we have to think of it now really from looking at future-proofing our economies. And this is something where I would really invite you to go back to whatever you're working on and think, how can you make sure that what you're working has co-benefits, and those co-benefits are, on the one hand, for gender or energy, if it's not the direct topic, but also thinking at it more holistically. I will stop there and I can expand later a bit more.
Thank you, Navina. I mean, you just explained the holistic approach from the just transition context, and also emphasized that it's not energy specifically, but we need to also look at the broader context from the just transition, the energy, and also that links to the social protection issues or education. And thank you for highlighting the importance of educating girls. And we will need more integrated support for our girl child and girl students, from the getting them into the education, right education, and also creating the right environment for them to feel confident about working in the sector as a technical or leadership roles. And that will eventually benefit women and girls in their integration into the sector. So now moving back a bit, and then I would like to hear a little bit more about, as we talked about girls, I'd like to invite Diksha to share any exciting or incredible innovation examples that was led by women or young women that you saw in the energy sector, and what you think that kind of innovation was kind of created, or what kind of enabling environment and it was able to help them create those innovations. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. So now my answer is not going to be as direct, because I think there's just too many of the innovations to name. I think what I would like to say is that out of the innovations that come out in the energy sector, it may not be that women come with the best technology or the latest tech, but it's more in the distribution of it, or in the way that financing is done, in the way that loans are obtained or structured, in the use of the product, which ends up having much more benefit to the household or to the communities, right? So, if you do a study on what sort of technology women choose, it would be more household goods, whereas men would not always, but I think this is documented in research that they would choose television, right, over a refrigerator. So it would be more in terms of the choices that they make, as well as how they engage with the supply chain. But innovations are, I think, there's a lot of innovations in finance, so pay as you go, and let me talk about that later. So, and then in terms of, what are the barriers, right? Talk a little bit about that as well. We know the usual barriers, but so the usual ones are sort of finance, and that there's not enough collateral for women entrepreneurs. There's a need for non-traditional collateral that is more pegged to, say, in the case of small businesses, it could be like their working capital, or it could be their supply orders, right? Things like that. But then you also need to engage with the banks to see their risk appetite, and you need to sensitize them as well. And not every bank will have that ability to say, okay, I'm going to have X% of my portfolio, as non-traditional loans. So that barrier needs to be overcome, and that conversation, of course, needs to happen, and that intervention with the financial sector. But I want to talk a little bit more about some of the perception and normative level barriers that I find more interesting, and I feel like it is a binding constraint, in the sense that if these were unlocked, then women would be able to come to the next level, or the next market, or the next business size. And these, I have found, are more things like the risk appetite that women take. So while it is a misconception that women do not take enough risk, it is also the fact that they are penalized more if they fail, right? So they have less of a space to fail as entrepreneurs. And then there's this whole issue of taking permission from their husbands and their male family members, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't always have the initiative, or let's say that extra space. Many times, even if they are the breadwinners, they choose to not say that their business is running the household. And therefore they don't want to take that loan, or do that innovation, which might lead to that innovation, right? So that's the barrier. And then, of course, mobility, et cetera, which is I guess we know this. And in terms of sort of forward-looking, or what to do, again, I would say there can be a lot. So my colleague talked about climate finance. I think there can be a lot done if we start thinking about new ways of structuring different finance streams with a gender lens for innovation. And so blended finance, et cetera. So just the financial products themselves, but also linking the products, as I said, with advisory support, right, to the banks so that they feel comfortable giving the loans as well. And all of this can lead to innovation. And lastly, I would say, again, it's more a question of the policies and the regulations in the financial sector need to be improved, obviously, for banks to be able to take that risk as well. But there can be a lot done just by creating subnational or local level institutions where in the places that women go and register their businesses, or in the places in the banks they go and take their loans, where this kind of gender focused interventions or you specifically cater towards female entrepreneurs, if that is in place. So all of this will lead to innovation. So I don't want to talk so much about the innovation itself, because I think small innovations are happening everywhere that impact people's lives much more. But it's, I think, unlocking the finance that is the bottleneck. Thanks.
Thank you, Diksha. I think you highlighted the importance of access to finance for female innovators. Well, I could share some examples from my side. I have seen some female entrepreneur CEO who's leading the renewable energy company in Cambodia. She was joining this pilot project with ADB, who was running innovative cooling solutions in Cambodia. And she was a great CEO, and she was taking the risks. So we could see that if the right environment is given, then what women can really lead and what women can do was a very impressive case for me. And also your intervention reminds me of one of the discussions that I had, one of the female tech leaders. She was very young, smart female leader. And then what she said, I don't need more mentorship, I need more funding. So if you'd like to support the women innovators, then I think the access to finance and dedicated access to finance for women leaders would be very important. Thank you. So Ms. Hirsch, so private sector just said they also need inclusive policy and more access to financing for women leaders and innovators for them to grow in the sector. What do you think the government's role and then how the government could work more effectively with industry, academia, or institutions or partners like us to provide more enabling environment? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I think for the government, the right policy framework has to be set, engaging all sectors, not just us here, the financiers, the private sector, but everyone should be engaged, because this will then showcase, as they have been saying, that education starts from the youth. We have to engage everyone. So we then have to showcase this so that the children or the girls will be interested in joining this sector or other male-dominated sectors. They have to see that there are already people or there are already women doing this job, and that it's very interesting, and that they are needed, and it should not limit them. Whatever the risks, whatever the needs, or whatever the capabilities. So this has to be showcased. And I think the project that the GAD sector in the budgeting of the different national government agencies here in the Philippines has been doing that. We have moved from doing skills development on cooking and from this level to actually equipping and reskilling and even upskilling our women workforce, particularly those who will be retiring, so that they do not stop working but still be engaged in the economy. So there are also engagements that the department has done with UP on the nuclear engineering course. And then Palawan State University also has the course on oil and gas, I think, engineering. So this has actually have resulted in women being now in the oil and gas field here in the Philippines, and I have been fortunate enough to meet them and be engaged with them doing the multi-partite monitoring of energy facilities and projects. So the technical schools also has to be engaged. It's not only the formal education sector, but also the technical education sector has also be engaged. And before, there's a secondary education institution here in the Philippines, which is only for boys, and they do industrial and mechanical and those aspects. But now they've opened up to girls, and there are now women that have been the product of that institution. So it's really opening up, and it's really a partnership between the private sector, the government, and the academe. It's not just two, but it should be a multi-sectoral engagement that has to be done. And we should also continuously train and educate them. So because innovation will come if they are continuously trained and they continuously educated, and then they will see what are the gaps and then what could be done. And those new knowledge or new things will be the result of these engagements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. You just highlighted the importance of providing the education and getting girls into the STEM field, and also providing the technical and vocational education for girls as well. And you just gave me a very great example of how academia and then private sector and government could collaborate together to open those opportunities for girls and then connect them with the real jobs. Thank you very much. And Navina, we just heard some elements about the enabling environments, innovations, and partnerships. How is ADB supporting DMCs to promote the gender responsive and inclusive just transition? And where do you see the greatest opportunity for future collaboration?
Thank you. I will answer the last part at the end. Not a silver bullet, but let's see. No, so I think we have heard a lot of good examples now from Hershey and from Diksha on how to transition out and how to create enough jobs or access to jobs and employment for women. So I think the other side of the coin is to think of just transition, not only as transitioning out of a fossil fuel dependent economy, but really transitioning into a green economy. And that green economy has a wide array of employment opportunities beyond the energy sector. So while we need to strengthen female participation in the energy sector, we should also look at all of those other sectors. And this brings me to really the importance of data. So we talk about finance, but finance can be unlocked by data. And I would like to tell you about a project we have in Central West Asia, and just leave the country out. But basically here, it's a project where there is a transitioning out of fossil fuels element. And in this, about 1 million female informal workers were losing their livelihood. They were not the direct losers in the story, they were indirect losers in the story. So we need to look, when we look at the value chain, we need to look at the direct, indirect, and induced players. And we thought about how to solve this problem. So we realized that there was no labor or skills audit in place. So what do we need to train them for if we don't know what they can do? That's the first thing. So we started doing a database. Now it has grown into something bigger, but we started with a database that basically told us what this million women were able to do, what type of education level they had, what type of assets they had at home, one goat, one duck, one chicken, or if they had a sewing machine, and so on and so forth. We also started collecting, after various field visits, information of what would they actually like to do. This is the other part, the aspirational part of it, opening opportunities from their own lens. And of course, some of the likes were a bit unrealistic, so that expectation had to be managed. But at the same time, other likes were quite realistic. But as a means of example, if a 7-year-old girl said, I want to be an engineer, yes, absolutely. But if a grandmother said, I want to be an astronaut, we were like, okay, we appreciate that, but let's manage it down. So doing this, it gave us really an overview of what they can do, what they would like to do, what they have. And then we matched it, and I'm pretty sure this was done with AI, with what jobs, what labors are there in place, what kind of demand is in place, so mapping the supply, matching the supply side with the demand side, and also matching it with the offers for capacity building and training that are in place, matching it with the financing opportunities that are in place. And this gives us also information that it's needed for collaterals when it comes to finance. The main issue for this type of microfinancing is the ticket size. The ticket size is not big enough for private banks. It's not big enough for many FIs. So with this, we have a type of collateral that can really give a clear lending approach for microfinance. And this is something that we're quite excited to see how it unfolds in the coming years now that the project is being implemented. So that's one of the things I think gives more opportunities. I don't work on education, I've never done, but I still think it's really one of the key elements we need to continue focusing on. Those of you that have access to the relevant agencies, highly recommending to anonymize all exams, give students a number. That's their number, they don't put their name on the exam. This solves many problems. There is enough data showcasing that. And maybe one last point before going to the silver bullet that we all know, but those of you that are in the room and are also women, you might have had the same problem I had. Sometimes when we go to utility, there is no toilet. There's no toilet for us. So we're always invited to the male toilet. I'm not going to comment on that part. But this is something, again, of thinking, how can we make sure that the very easy to remove barriers are removed? There's macro level barriers that need behavioral change and need time, but there's really small things that we can remove faster and allow for security for women. So, Jinha, you asked me what ADB is doing. So we're doing many things. We have been working on this topic now for various years. But just to give an across-the-board overview, we have multiple technical assistance grants where we are supporting our clients in upstream work, so really conducting assessments to understand where the just transition priorities are, where the critical sectors and vulnerabilities are, and how to adapt the policy to be able to have that holistic approach. We're also supporting capacity building, be it to tailored trainings or more holistic developments. Then at the midstream level, we have advisory services that allow us to have just transition transactions. And downstream in our sovereign as well as non-sovereign side, we're supporting investments. Fun enough, last year we had the first just transition project in the sovereign side being approved, and it was not in energy, it was agriculture. So these are some of the things where we're learning. We have also a very big portfolio when it comes to employment and skills projects. We have obviously a lot of energy projects. So not only transitioning into renewables, but also closure of coal-fired power plants and so on. And here we're looking at having a more programmatic approach. Our approach has changed over the years. So of course, a project can be just transition aligned, but you can also have a programmatic approach for a country where we are aware that there is not going to be one measure that looks at just transition as an once-off investment, but really embeds just transition in your financial flows. And with this, it comes to the silver bullet, partnerships. So as ADB, we are really very happy to be working in the region, and we have a great array of expertise, but we need our partners. And this is where we're working with multiple development partners, CSOs, private sector, academia, and others. And depending on the type of project or process, it's really key to continue working with partnerships. And anyone that is interested, please approach us or approach the director of gender who's sitting over there. But let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Navina. I think ADB is doing great jobs. And if you're interested in just transition or those holistic approach, programmatic approach, or those knowledge work or connecting the jobs with the new technologies, all this fascinating work, then please reach out to Navina and us. So today's panel discussion, I could quickly summarize that the importance of the policy, inclusive policy, as an enabling environment for women and girls to be participating in the sector more systematically, and also there should be dedicated education and training opportunities so they can have upskilling or reskilling opportunities, as well as opening the education at the earlier stage to start the career pathway for girls. And it is also very important to create a safe and women-friendly workspace. So once women get into the sector, then they can stay and grow. And also dedicated financing for women innovators and entrepreneurs is a key for creating women-led innovations. And finally, gender norms and bias, we should tackle them to continue the momentum. Before we wrap up, I'd like to open the floor in case we have any questions to the panel members. Yes.
Okay, I speak loud. Hello, everyone. My name is Saida Yamanova. I am from ADB, Kyrgyz Resident Mission, working supporting energy projects. And I just would like to share our experience financing of gender elements. Now we have Ochkurgan HPP project, which is ongoing, and there is a gender elements to finance young women engineers. And now executing agency developed a program to finance 12 young women engineers. The selection is ongoing, and this is 2-year program. It is a grant. The ladies will get financing from the project during 2 years and get training on the job. The requirements is selection only a young woman with engineering education, and the execution agency just delayed this implementation because they took not serious selection of women, and finally they decided, okay, let we include in the requirements of the selection of economists or finance specialists, and we just advised, no, let's develop our young women engineers with engineering education. Yeah, and just I hope that the program will be successful. Yeah, and just to share that we ADB finance and try to grow young women engineers. And just to add that, honestly say, it's Ochkurgan HPP, which is in rural area. Yeah, and I personally expect that 100 applications EPP will receive, EPP executing agency, but unfortunately only 17 young women applied.
Okay, thank you for sharing the example of young women engineering staff getting involved and benefit from ADV project. We would love to learn more, so we may reach out to you. Let me invite one more question. Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Pao Pagadon from the Asian People's Movement for Debt and on Debt and Development. You mentioned you need more male allies, but specifically, what do you need from the male allies? What do you want us to do?
Okay, what is male allyship? Who would like to take that question?
Thank you. That's a really nice question to end with, actually, if we're gonna. So I think first off is to begin and get your buy-in into the cause of gender equality, and recognize that it's not just a women's issue, and that it's also a male issue, and that it impacts men and the household, and therefore, the community, or your neighborhood, etc., and then the economy and the country. So there's sort of interventions at the personal level, at the mindset level, at the behavior level, and then the choices that you make, the decisions you make, the biases to be, you recognize your own biases, not just, and then you do that in the household, you do that in the workplace culture improves. Then you start becoming slowly not necessarily a champion, but you don't see the cause of women's entry into the energy sector or gender equality as something that is divorced from your own life and something that's sort of out there. And so what we need you to do is just recognize that when we talk about gender equality, it affects your day-to-day life as much as the economy does, or as much as your pay salary, or as much as the upcoming jobs that are there in the economy, or social media and AI, which is the new ill these days. So and just recognizing that and recognizing the patterns is what male allyship is about for me. And of course, just at a personal level, I have 2 boys, and and for me, recognizing that they also have a role to play, not just in upholding gender norms at a particular level, and recognizing equality and all of the stuff that they teach in schools anyway these days, but also recognizing that the norms also affect them, and that they also are affected by this demand, right, of men don't cry, they have to be the household head, et cetera, et cetera. So I think at a personal level, you can participate in becoming, recognizing that these norms seep into your day-to-day life, and then therefore the work culture, and then therefore the work that you do with the government, and therefore the policies that you champion, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a great answer, and that will help you to be the male ally for us. Thank you. Okay, I'm just being mindful of the time, so I'd like to wrap up our panel discussion. Please give a big applause for our panel members. And let me invite Jess back to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jinha, and thank you again to our panelists. So I won't take too much more of your time. I know it's the end of the day, so thank you very much for your energy and powering through to the end of the day. So I think just reflecting on some of the examples we heard from the panel today, I think we've got real hope in the room and many reasons for optimism. While no doubt many challenges exist, we heard so many great practical examples of what works, investing in STEM and skills, building pathways into quality jobs, and supporting women-led businesses and innovators, and also strengthening partnerships, whether that be with academia, but also, again, with the private sector. So these are not new ideas, but they're proven approaches that we can see work and demonstrate real results. And I think perhaps that's what I'd like to end with. I think the message really is that we are not starting from scratch across our region. There clearly are so many good examples. We have the evidence, tools, partnerships, and so many inspiring women innovators and leaders. Our challenge now really is to move from these isolated interventions into systemic and programmatic change to scale what is working, keep that momentum sustained, and ensure that women are not just participants in the energy transition, but that they are really leading the future and helping shape the industries and the jobs that are being created. I think we can see that an inclusive energy transition is not only fairer, but it's smarter, it's more resilient, and more likely to deliver the full economic potential of the transition for everybody. So with that, we'll close the session. Thank you again for joining and enjoy the rest of the ASEF week. Thank you.